here, came here for the very first one. And in 2006, my presentation was, we think our co-op is failing, what do we do? Is there any hope for our co-op? And I'll go through that here and talk a little bit about it. So our business is in Austin. So we're a two-partner LLC. Some of you may remember we had a third partner 2 years ago and last year, but she's no longer with us. We're a licensed oil hauler, which we used to be a renderer, and I'll talk a little bit about what that means and why we're not a renderer anymore. We're a biodiesel wholesaler and retailer. We sell vegetable oil wholesale and retail through our own facility and also a retail outlet we have a contract with. We do vegetable oil conversion kit sales and installations. I know that's kind of the exception here at this conference, but we do that. And we also sell fueling station equipment. We have fleet customers that use it as well as resellers. So where we came from, in 2005 we started a cooperative, much like many people here. We started meeting over coffee and beer, talking about what we can do with biodiesel. We had probably 20 or 30 people, and ultimately we found that being a nonprofit, which we did become, not a 501c3, but just a Texas nonprofit, we found it kind of difficult to just work with the people. We'd call a vendor and want to buy something, and it was just strange to interact with vendors and customers because we just didn't see us as a real business. And none of us had any co-op experience. None of us had any leadership experience in organizing members to do things that they didn't know how to do. So we kind of said, where's this going? So we came here in 2006 and gave our presentation with all our little ups and downs and talked to a lot of people here and decided that the co-op model overall was not very successful for most people. And there are some really notable exceptions, obviously people is a great one. As soon as we got back, we said we've got to stop what we're doing. We don't have any land, and we were kicked out of the land because we had a bad member who said we could use his land, and then once we were there for a long time, we got kicked out. We had people that wouldn't show up to do any of their work. We were all working full-time jobs. I was the only person who was sort of managing things, and I had a very full-time job. So it was not meant to be for us. There we go. So this was in the early days. We did make our own fuel, made a bunch of different batches, used it in our own stuff. We had a little generator we tested it with, standard apple seed processor that was donated to us. This work to put it in this overarch facility there was probably 6 months of trying to get it going outside with no electricity and no water. Digging ditches, bringing backhoes to make a ditch that we could drive over with our truck. It was crazy. So we just didn't have the greatest experience, so we moved on. So this is what we wound up with. This is just a little warehouse. It's part of a mini storage lot. We had our old Dodge that we bought, and we started pulling around 330-gallon totes. We got some 1,000-gallon trailer on Craigslist for a couple $100s, and we started selling fuel from that. Every Tuesday night we'd have an open house. This is what we've evolved to today. Unfortunately, this other part's cut off, but now we have a 1,600-square-foot warehouse. We've got a 10,000-gallon biodiesel tank, a 5,000-gallon vegetable oil tank, a 1,000-gallon finished oil tank, a 500-gallon delivery tank, 250-gallon suction tank, a bunch of Kiwis or totes in the back, and then some real old scrubby totes back here that we like to pretend aren't really there. So this property is just fantastic for us. We found that's one of the big things is we had to find a property that would work for us, where the people understood what we were doing and were okay with it. As you'll see a little bit later, things didn't always work as planned.
Can I ask you a question? Is that
sure?
That first one there, is that your all collection tank?
Yeah, it's a 250-gallon suction trailer that we use to collect oil. We've actually just in the past few weeks moved away from that. One of the big things that's happening with our business is the regulatory agencies in Texas don't like what we're doing. They want to regulate us as if we're taking slaughterhouse carcasses and bones and blood and all this stuff and then making cattle feed out there. So because of that regulation, we're not really supposed to do any rendering, the kind of facility that we have. So it took us about 6 months and a lot of conversations, a lot of meetings, and basically we just had to beg them, can you please give us this license? You see what we're doing, you see how low impact it is, Can you just work with us on this? So finally, they said, well, you could ask for a variance for all the rules. And so, okay, we did that. So we asked for a variance for every rule. Everything from having a set of lockers that was 18 inches off the floor, a shower for women and a shower for men, all these crazy rules, we got variances for everything. So about a year and a half ago, we got that license, and then we moved about 6 months ago. After we moved, we discovered that we lost the license when we moved. It wasn't specific to us, and so they since pulled our license, and we had to go and try to get it again. We found out it's impossible to get it in the facility we're at without spending $30,000 or $40,000 on renovations and construction. So we've abandoned the rendering license, and we actually now have a hauler's license, which allows us only to take used oil directly to a licensed rendering facility. The cool thing is we found a licensed rendering facility that's just far enough away, it's about 90 miles, where they don't compete with us for oil contracts, but it's close enough where we can actually get it down there in a reasonable time frame. Do you have a question about that?
Yeah. How did you go from that, how did you finance the tanks, the 20,000 gallons?
How do we finance everything?
Yeah.
Overall, I paid for everything to get the business started, and then pretty quickly we used our own good credit to get loans. So we started out with nothing. I put $4,000 into it, and then we paid that back with a line of credit that Wells Fargo gave us, really based on my credit, one of my two business partners' credit. It's still guaranteed by us. One of the things you find in these businesses is that a new business gets nothing. If you're a new business, it's like they don't even want to talk to you. So luckily, I have a good job at Dell, but I still do full time. But I work from home, which gives me a lot of flexibility to do this stuff. So based on our credit, me and my other partner, and the fact that we're homeowners, we were able to get some loans and lines of credit. But that 10,000 gallon tank cost $3,000. The 5,000 gallon tank cost $2,000. We had this the sucker tank custom built for us by a guy who had one for himself that does home brewing. So that cost us $3,000. The trailer cost us about $2,000. So what we've done is we started with this, like kind of a modular design. This doesn't even show all of our trailers. We also have a 20-foot gooseneck trailer for a 1,000-gallon oil tank on it. We've got a utility trailer. So we've got either 4 or 5 trailers all being pulled by the same Dodge 1-ton truck. So we don't have a vacuum truck that would cost us $1,000 a month. We don't have a bobtail to do deliveries of biodiesel. We don't have any of those things. We just pull different trailers. Trailers don't really have much maintenance. They don't have heavy insurance requirements. You don't need a CDL to run them. It's great. So this goes into some of these details. So initial funding was by us. We started out in a salvage yard as a co-op. It was a disaster. Yes, sir.
Can you go back to the part about rendering and becoming an oil hauler?
It's in here too. Yeah, we kind of got ahead of the text.
I'm interested in finding out how you get the oil to your place if you're not.
Well, that's the thing is, in Texas, now one of the things about rendering, I even hate the word rendering because it implies a whole lot of things that we don't do. We take good used cooking oil and we just simply filter it, and then we dewater it. That's it. But in the state of Texas, they have this 40-page document that talks about rendering. And when they come out and talk to you, they don't want to hear anything. All they know is rendering, rendering, rendering. So it's kind of in our vocabulary now. So we started out in the salvage yard, and then we moved to my backyard, and then we went to a mini storage, and then now we're in a real warehouse. Everything came from Craigslist. We attained these licenses and our insurance over time. One of the things that I'm doing a presentation on tomorrow is the business of being a grease hauler. And I'm going to go into that for a good hour, hour and a half of just, this is the permit we got, these are the tanks we use, this is the equipment, this is the regulatory body that oversees us. Without trying to get too specific in Texas, I'll talk extensively about the generational changes we made too. And now we're at $500,000 per year in revenue. We sell about 100,000 gallons of B100 and about 40,000 gallons of vegetable oil. And also, we were fortunate that our one competitor decided to get out of the biodiesel business. It was a 3-person LLC, much like us, who started out about 3 years before we did. They were pretty homebrew, unfriendly, and they weren't very community-oriented. They would go to conferences and look at us and say, don't make this in your backyard. And just some very unfriendly things. So ultimately, we found out that they thought they were going to be a biodiesel producer. and they got bought by a big company in Houston. And when you live in Austin, Houston's kind of the enemy, because Houston's big money, it's big oil, it's big Texas. So as soon as they got bought by this company in Houston, we thought, ooh, either this is really bad, they're going to take over every possible customer account we might get, or it's really good because we can just say they're the bad guys. Well, ultimately, the deal fell through, and so these three guys, who their hopes and dreams were built on this business, to be bought out by this company in Houston. And they're good guys. I really like them. We have a good relationship with them now. They decided to get out of the business. One moved to Alaska. We wound up buying all of their equipment, not their name. And unfortunately, if you search for Austin Biodiesel, you still get these other guys at the first hit, even though they're not in business. So we really felt like we were standing on the shoulders of giants. These guys came in 2002. They started making biodiesel at just small scale. Then they started being a distributor. And I don't know if you guys ever heard this, but Austin was the number one city in America for biodiesel. We had 35 stations selling B20. I don't get that excited about B20, but it gets some press. So at this point, we bought their 3 B100 stations, and along with the 2 that we already have, and then we've developed one more, we have 6 retail outlets for biodiesel. So here's one. So Judys Beer and Wine is a really cool local place. We've got our station out here, and we sell biodiesel from that, B100. They sell it for $5.09, and they sell maybe a couple thousand gallons a month. EcoWise is kind of our flagship store. Over here in the background, you can see we have another tank. That's our vegetable oil tank. We actually sell used cooking oil that's been filtered and dewatered for $3.29 a gallon. So biodiesel today is about $4.79, or maybe $4.95 over there, and the vegetable oil is usually about $1.50 cheaper. And that's great, because this is a real eco customer base too. People came in all the time and asked, well, how do I buy vegetable oil? So we finally set them up with a tank. And by the way, out of all of our customers, some of them own their own equipment, and some of them just use our equipment. So we basically went in and said, we're going to give you everything. You're going to get the tank, you're going to get the fuel for free, you're going to get everything. Once you sell it, then you need to pay us. And that worked out great for a while. Well, now the load of B100 costs us $35,000, and these places are burning through it. I'm blending it and taking that credit from the IRS. It takes 2 to 3 months to come in. The cash flow is killing us. So that's a business model that has to change somewhat. Do you have a question?
Yeah, so you're not processing your own fuel, you're buying it? Or
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh.
We're not a biodiesel producer.
Okay.
In Austin, I mean, even though it looked, like I said, from co-op to monopoly, I say that tongue-in-cheek because we are the only people that sell B100, but it's still a fairly small market, maybe 5,000 or 10,000 gallons a month. We do about 8,500 gallons a month today, which is not enough to support a real business yet.
Just a question about that tank we're looking at. What's that funnel-looking thing with the lid?
Oh, yeah, that thing's pretty cool. I went to a place in Florida for a family vacation, and I saw an above-ground storage tank that looked like it was something out of a catalog. It had every little doodad you could think of, and I started taking pictures and asking the guy, well, what is this? How did you? He had a biodiesel retail station on a trailer. In Florida, you don't have to have dollar signs on your meters to make them weights and measures certified. Unfortunately, in Texas, we do, which is, by the way, a big problem with all of our stations. None of them are weights and measures certified. If we do that, it's another $3,000 a pop. So that's a big problem with our stuff, and I do feel like eventually the state's going to say, we can't do that, and I'm going to have to tell all 5 stations, you're shut down for 6 weeks while we order you $20,000 worth of pumps, and you're going to have to pay for it. So that's a risk. Anyway, Frankie, this is an overflow spill container. If you fill into it, it comes up and pours out into the container. We also tried a whistle that some people use for home heating tanks, but we found that the flow wasn't fast enough. Maybe if we used a quick connect and tightened it down so that only airflow could come out of that spout, maybe that would work, but the whistle didn't work for us. We also have a gauge that's just simply full to empty, and on a cylindrical tank on its side, it's not very useful except right at half a tank. So when they get half a tank, they call us, and since we deliver 500 gallons at a time and it's a 1,000-gallon tank, it works out pretty well. But everything else is off-the-shelf stuff. Fill-right pump that's made for biodiesel. We still haven't found any paint that will withstand biodiesel spills. So about every 6 months we go out and we buy a pond liner and we just throw it over it. Keeps the tanks looking nice. This guy had the idea, see, in Austin we've got Willie Nelson, and we actually deliver fuel to Willie Nelson. And anyway, his business, he likes to call himself Bio Willie. So this guy who has aspirations to be a big baller, he says, I'm going to be Bio Leo. So he's got this Mexican restaurant with his tank up in the air, and his tank says Bio Leo. So people really don't know what Bio Leo is, so he doesn't get a whole lot of business out there. So we're trying to get him to at least put a sticker that says biodiesel. So, anyway, but it does bring in some business. So the rendering license, just briefly, it's required to collect oil for commercial use in Texas. It's regulated by our Meat Safety Assurance group. Has nothing to do with meat, but here they are. To get it cost us $750, which was a lot of money at the time early on. It's also based on our income. And with revenues of $500,000 on the biodiesel sales, even though there's very little profit in that, their fee goes up to $3,000 or $4,000 a year. It's very expensive. Took us over 6 months from that initial filing to get that license in hand. We had to submit construction permits and request a waiver for everything, and then just recently we lost it.
In California, they know about biodiesel, and they charge you $300 for the oil to transport for yourself. If you're gonna sell it commercially, all you have to do is pay the $3,000, and they give you the license. But they don't ask you anything about the rest of it.
It's two separate
That's
licenses.
actually not quite true. There's two separate licenses in California. One is if you're transporting, which you're doing. The second is the same as your rendering license. So
Correct.
you have it in two parts, and it's $100 plus a $3,000 enforcement fee. So it comes to $3,100 for basically every vehicle you move and $3,100 for your facility.
Well, for us, there's also an extensive inspection process. They came out at the beginning of the year, and after we moved, because there was an investigation for oil theft, kind of a competitor was accused of stealing oil from someone else, and we wound up getting involved because we sold oil to somebody who may have bought oil from somebody who's accused of theft. So because of this, they came out to our facility and said, oh, you moved. And so they were not happy about that at all, and they wrote us the ticket thing. They said, well, you know, we can fine you $16,500 a day since the day you moved November 1st, and today is February 3rd. So it was one thing after another like that. So we agreed to make remediations. We were going to do the whole process. We went through the application process for a new facility. We filed for construction permit, and they denied the permit. So they said we had 30 days to submit in writing what we were going to do to correct it. So I wrote this one letter, this is what we're going to do, and submitted it. So they came out about 30 days later and said, you mean you didn't shut down your business when we told you to shut down your business? They didn't really tell us to shut down our business. They just said we had 30 days to comply. So then they showed me the fine print where technically somewhere it says you're not authorized to operate a rendering facility until blah, 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 blah. And I said, well, come on, if I'm in a restaurant and I fail a code violation, you're going to put a lock on the door. You're going to say you can't be in business. You're out of business. You never told us that. So we had a lot of disagreements with them, and we had to be very nice because we know that, as someone else mentioned, if you really mess with these guys, they'll make it their mission to put you down. So ultimately, we gave in and we said we're going to give up the idea of being a rendering company for now. We're going to stop pursuing it, and we're going to get a hauler's license. So we had to hire someone to come in and collect the oil for us, give them the oil, and they got a couple $1,000s worth of oil for free while we waited for one piece of paper to go to the office and get mailed from one department to the other, be approved, and come right back to us. He'd already seen our equipment. He already said he'd approve it as soon as he saw the paperwork. But in Texas, when you mail that check in, it doesn't go to those people. It goes to a general fund for the whole state. And then there's some note in there that says, oh, when this cleared, send a note over here. So it took a very long time.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What's the idea of collecting vegetable oil if you're just distributing fuel right now?
That's a good point. I did not mention that. So our business is several parts. First of all, we collect the oil, we dewater it, filter it, and sell it to people who have conversion kits, grease car kits. Over time, as we've gotten surplus supplies, we've sold it to the biodiesel industry's feedstock. We've also used it in our own vehicles. But the ultimate goal is to collect so much oil that we first satisfy all of the customers that we have that run on grease, and then we have a substantial amount left over to have tolled into biodiesel by a local producer that will give it back to us for about $1 a gallon is the goal. And then if we can get another 10,000 gallons a month of that coming in, then all of the biodiesel that we sell in Austin will be coming from locally produced WVO. The only other company in Austin that sells biodiesel is a petroleum distributor that sells B5 through a bunch of refuel of their standard Shell stations. So they also would probably need somebody who would buy the fuel from us instead of where they're buying it today if we had it. So, and one last thing, all the biodiesel we sell today comes from animal fat purchased from a giant company called Beacon Energy that now just bought a plant in Texas. I'm not a huge fan of animal fat biodiesel. I really hate supporting the factory farm industry, but it's better than petroleum, and it's the only thing available in Texas right now.
Yeah, you mentioned selling dewatered vegetable oil to people with grease car kits. So you're selling that as a fuel, and is there? I was wondering, is there legal implication there, selling as a highway fuel, or are you doing something else with it?
I think there's some gray area there. That's also something I do plan to talk about in depth on my other presentation. But just real quick, there's the EPA and the IRS that regulate these things. The EPA says vegetable oil is not a valid motor fuel because it hasn't been through Tier 1 and Tier 2 health effects testing. They will let us register it as an additive for diesel with a whole lot less testing, and I've been talking to the EPA about that. They know exactly what we're doing, and I've had some real candid conversations with the EPA. In fact, I've expressed a lot of disappointment that they're pretty unfriendly with what our industry or our community is doing. And they said, well, you know, things are going to change over time.
Bullshit.
The usual thing. But the people that I've dealt with have been pretty friendly. I've never gotten a letter saying we shouldn't be doing it. And we also pay our road tax. So every gallon that we sell, we pay 24.4 cents to the IRS, which is in my third presentation, which is Sunday, which is all the legal aspects of everything that we do. There's the IRS, the EPA, there's the 637 and the 720 and the 849 for biodiesel. You can also file those documents for waste vegetable oil as a fuel. One cool thing that I found out, someone on the local B100 biz and I myself did some research about this and found that there is a credit for waste vegetable oil as a fuel. It's 50 cents a gallon, just like the waste vegetable oil is biodiesel.
Have you gone after that?
I've got it.
Really?
I've got paid on it.
How do you actually, I've read the law, and my tax attorney could not decipher it.
It's real specific. In October of 2007, the Senate Technical Committee on Biodiesel, sort of alternative fuels, they clarified a term that's called liquid hydrocarbons from biomass. And it specifically includes vegetable oil. In fact, according to one of my biodiesel producer friends in Texas, in 2008, I think January of 2008, the 720 or the 8849 now doesn't say hydrocarbons, it says fuel. So it says liquid fuel from biomass. The people at the IRS said you can take wood slurry and do whatever to it to make it a liquid fuel. That's creditable for 50 cents a gallon too. It's a fantastic program that they said hardly anybody is taking advantage of. So what I did is I filed a 720X, which is an amended 720 for 8 quarters, all the way back to 2006 when they did it. They immediately approved all of it up to the amount of the road tax that I have due, which is 24.4 cents. Then they rejected everything else, saying I needed another excise tax registration activity letter, which is activity letter AL. And to get that, I have to have the IRS come out. I've got an appointment with them in August. Now, they've already approved it. They said, we're going to pay you conditional approval. And when I explained everything that we're doing, they said, yeah, that's what you need to do. But it's our standing policy that we send somebody on site for every registration visit, or every registration application.
What are those forms again?
There's
720.
there's a 720, the 8849. Those are 637, and there's Pub 540, 510.
540 or
510. And if you come to my presentation about the legal aspects, I go over very detailed.
Just a real quick question. When I was looking at the 720, I thought that I saw that the liquid hydrocarbons, from what I remember, I guess before they changed it, was actually at 19 cents a gallon as opposed to 24.4.
No, road tax is 24.24.
That's what I mean. But there's a different road tax.
There is one that's 18 cents that's an other.
Or maybe that's what it was, but maybe.
Well, there was a point where we didn't believe that what we were doing was liquid hydrocarbons from biomass, because most people say hydrocarbon, well, that's like petroleum, that's not vegetable oil. And so we went to the other, which was 18 cents.
Okay.
That was for the road tax.
Yeah, that's not talking about.
That's what
for
you're
road
talking
tax. I'm talking about for road tax.
Okay, for
specifically.
road tax for liquid hydrocarbons from biomass, I couldn't tell you specifically. I know I went through that too, and finally came to the conclusion it was 24.4.
So which is the same as what it is for regular diesel fuel, so you just.
So what we do is, let's say we sell 10,000 gallons in a quarter. So if I'm really anxious, I could file an 8849 at any point throughout the quarter, but it makes for kind of messy bookkeeping. If I don't need the money, since I'm not out the money anyway, I didn't spend anything, I can wait till the end of the quarter, I file the 720, and I say 10,000 gallons times 24 cents is 2,440. Then I have to itemize every half a month for that quarter, how many gallons I sold, what the tax was due, and then I say how many gallons were used on road, or how many we sold, and then subtract it all up, and it comes out to, getting 22.6 cents a gallon, I think. It's 50 cents minus 24. It's 24.6.
So you're not having to pay them and then they pay you, they credit you
That's
your
right.
road tax and pay you the difference.
Yeah, and
Boy, that's nice bookkeeping.
yeah. And I'll go through some of this stuff real quick, because in my other presentations, when I talk about the legalities, I talk about what's required to do that. So a good example is, I buy 10,000 gallons of B100, blend it, have to wait for that credit to come back. You can file early with the 8849 and get that back sooner, but there's some specific paperwork you have to file. Like a certificate for biodiesel is an often missed one, and I filed one for $5,000 a couple months ago, and only 1,000 was from this producer. One of the producers, 4,000 was the other one. The $1,000 producer guy put the wrong number on his certificate. They rejected all of it. So I'm out $5 grand for 6 more weeks while I refile.
Oh, to refile.
So this is our suction tank, and we just moved away from this system because, and in the presentation tomorrow with Steve about oil collection, we'll talk about, I'm sure both of us will talk about how we collect oil. But one of the things is, if you use a suction tank, you can only get so much vacuum. And in our case, we found that prevented us from getting the sludge at the bottom of our tanks. So we'd start out with a tank that was this tall, and we'd have a little bit of sludge, and we'd get the stuff off the top, maybe a little bit of the sludge, and then that sludge would grow and grow and grow. And eventually, we'd have to go out with a shovel, or a scoop of some kind, or a colander, and scoop it out into a bucket, which we would seal and then throw in the dumpster. That's one way we did it. So ultimately, and unfortunately I don't have a slide here, but what we've moved to is a larger utility trailer with a 750-gallon tank on it with a 2-inch trash pump, like the example that he uses. We used to use a trash pump, but we found that it emulsifies the oil and the water, which makes it very hard to dewater later. A lot harder if you're using small-scale stuff like we were. It also chews up all the food and stuff like that. It was just a more difficult process to deal with once it was done. It's loud. If you have a cut in your hose, the oil goes everywhere.
Very quickly.
And we thought this is the best solution because it's got good vacuum pressure, it's going to get out of the oil, it's going to be quiet, it's going to be clean. But ultimately we found it was too limiting. So if anybody's interested in this trailer, we've got about $4,500 or $5,000 into it because we replaced the 250-gallon tank with a 500-gallon tank. We put an electric pump on it to keep it primed up. It's an awesome setup, and we're selling it for like $3 grand. So I think we have a buyer in New Jersey, but if anybody's interested, it's a beautiful system. It just has its limitations if you're getting them scaling up. Can I see a question?
What's the answer? How much you take for a grand?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, 3500
Mississippi's a lot
United
closer than New Jersey. Yeah, in Texas. Just a couple things real quick. In Texas, we have what's called a motor fuels tax license. In order to haul petroleum, we have to get it. $30,000 bond that they require just in case we might buy from the petroleum rack tax-free, and then we owe taxes to the state. In Texas, biodiesel is exempt from state road tax, so we don't have to pay that road tax.
But
So
you
we
still
don't-
have to put the bond up.
We still have to put the bond up.
Jesus.
That was very difficult, and in my other presentation, I'll talk about that too. Hopefully, the presentation that's going to be done about insurance and risk management, he'll talk a little bit about that too, about how to get bonds. because it's ridiculous. And the only reason we have to do it is because we use B99.99 because of the stupid IRS ruling about not getting credit for B100 unless you wait till the end of the year. So another interesting thing is in Texas, our definition of biodiesel includes WVO because they wrote it as any fuel wholly or partially derived from vegetable oil. So we get out of that 20 cents per gallon.
Well, yours is animal oil.
Oh, I'm referring to using WVO as a fuel, not the biodiesel.
Okay, gotcha.
IRS registration, if you sell it, it hasn't had the tax paid, 637, they rejected it the first time. One of the things dealing with the IRS is that they often send somebody who hasn't done any research in your case. And so after writing this book about everything that we're doing and everything we think we're supposed to do, they send a guy out who sits down and says, okay, what can I help you with? So we spent 4 hours with the guy, walking in from tank to tank, going through the process flow. This is our pump, this is how we sell it. He's just scratching his head. Well, I don't think you have to charge tax on WVO, because I don't think that's taxable. So 6 months later, we get a technical clarification. We've got back taxes due, we've got penalties, we've got interest, but we get all those credits to make up for it.
And no letter from the guy told you that.
That guy,
Of course, he didn't have that conversation with you.
so we're still waiting for our final AL registration, but we'll get it.
Which is, what's AL stands for what?
Alternative fueler. Now, some of the things with the IRS, these codes actually mean things, but they're not obvious. So the blender's registration is M, and it means to mix. So that's how they call it in the IRS office, but then once you talk about blending. Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, I don't know if you guys have heard of it. I'll bring it up because it's bad for all of us. Texas says that biodiesel is bad for the environment.
Yeah.
The 2% NOx increase in engines that are 12 years old in a heavy-duty duty cycle taken out of the engine and put in the lab is apparently worse than all the benefits of biodiesel. So they banned biodiesel in 110 counties in Texas.
Oh, shit.
Our workaround is
Those
that
oil-producing counties?
it's the 110 most populous counties: Dallas, Austin, Houston, San Antonio. So the way we're working around that is we're selling B100, which isn't under their jurisdiction because they only regulate what they call text-led fuel. It's a lot of political stuff, but the real catch is we're selling B99, but we're blending in just a squirt of diesel so that it becomes B99.99. And I got a letter from the state comptroller's office, which is not TCEQ, but the tax office, that said we have to register our fuel at 0.1% margin. So if we're B99.95 or greater, we're supposed to call it B100. So that gets me out of all the regulations with TCEQ until TCEQ figures the whole thing out, and they say, well, we don't really accept that. So we might be in have to do some more work.
So Texas is not really stepping up. It's not good. So many roadblocks.
There's a lot of roadblocks. We have to report how many gallons we sell monthly. They want to know if we sell 9,999 gallons. They want to know that in the report because there's 1 gallon of diesel in it. So the motor fuels tax license is all to carry that 1 gallon of diesel. So we've got this catch-22 situation where if we sell B100, we don't get the credit. If we sell B99, we can't sell it. So we're in this middle ground where technically the EPA defines a blend of biodiesel as at least 0.1% diesel. Well, if we're at 0.1%, we're in violation of TCEQ rules. So what we're doing is we're just counting on the fact that EPA and IRS don't actually ask you how many gallons of each fuel went into your blend. They just ask you how many gallons of biodiesel went into the blend. So we're basically double-edged sword. We can do it this way and get fined. We can do it this way and be put out of business. So we're making our best effort. We report too much to even go into. Like I said, I work full-time for Dell, but I also work full-time for DieselGreen. So when I'm at home, between every Dell call, I'm filing the form with the IRS, or I'm doing something in QuickBooks to figure out how much we've sold, or I'm sending invoices. Reporting is a major part of what we do.
I have a question about QuickBooks. So how are you reporting volume?
QuickBooks?
Yeah, because obviously liquid has a different density based on temperature.
We go by net gallons. So that's a good question, though. Sometimes it used to be that every time we get a load, it would be 7,000 gallons. That's it. And then about 6 months ago, we started buying from this big producer that says gross gallons 7,500, net gallons 7,301 gallons. So I called them, what is this? I started researching and finding that, you know, that could be a real issue for us. So they're selling us fuel at 130 degrees. At 70 degrees, it might be 7,300 gallons. 130 degrees at 7,500. But at the temperature that we actually sell it at, it's probably somewhere in between. So what I've decided to do is that for everything over what we, well, let me take that back. What I've decided to do is that every gallon we sell, we pay the road tax on. And so it doesn't matter whether they sold it to us or gave it to us based on temperature. We sold it, and we're going to pay road tax on it. And what we can't take the credit on, and I'll take that back, we take the credit on it too. Steve?
Do you have any idea how much of this is unique to Texas?
The TCEQ thing is, the B99 is just BS nationwide. I mean, the word B99 shouldn't even be in our vocabulary. And I really wish that our industry, the big guys with all the money, could have lobbied somebody to change something in the past 5 years. One other thing I want to mention, speaking of that, the NBB has a lock on anybody who produces biodiesel. You got to pay them $2,500 to join them as a member to get access to their Tier 1 and Tier 2 test data. One of the things that I started working on recently is to try to get an exemption from that and to break that bond. So there's a process through the American Arbitration Association where you can go and say, I don't believe that the MBB should charge $2,500 or that they shouldn't charge anything because they've already recouped their cost. If that's successful through this arbitration process, then that would open the door for us to sell biodiesel legally without the $2,500 fee and without being an MBB member. So Todd from Promethean has also talked about, we talked about that at length.
Actually, I sent them a copy, and I started the process as well, and I actually spoke to the EPA, and I could
so
that as well.
the point we're at now is it's $3,200 to go through the arbitration process. So,
You're poor.
but there may be a way to get the EPA to
Yeah, but don't they take a percentage?
It's $2,500 plus a percentage.
Right,
In
percentage
fact,
of what your sale is.
yeah, it's a penny per gallon. In fact, if you're a large producer selling 50 million gallons or more, you're going to pay $150,000 a year to the NBB.
But
So
who's the MBB?
National
Biodiesel
Biodiesel
Board.
Yeah.
If
But
you're
you may
selling,
want to do that as a large producer if you have a separate set of interests, and it allows you, the MBB, they're sort of a lobby organization. So
Sure.
it allows them to basically get funding for lobbying without having to take direct contributions. They get to look very impartial, even though they're lobbying for.
And it's also 1 penny per gallon, my understanding is over 200, if you produce over 250,000
Yeah,
gallons.
it's the sliding scale.
it's $2,500 for a small producer.
Right.
For a larger producer, it's even more plus
Was,
penny per gallon.
yeah.
Yeah, the 125,000 I quoted comes from the NBB site where they calculated out if you're a producer making this much, and this is how much you're going to pay.
So it's 250,000 gallons a year, that's where they start taking the extra penny?
I think that's right, yeah. But you got the $2,500 up front too.
That's a one-time fee? Or
No,
a year?
it's yearly.
Annually.
It's annually. And so a lot of people, when they get started with a project, they don't have $2,500 more to spend. So, but the real issue to me is that we shouldn't have to be a member of a trade organization unless we want to.
Right.
Their politics may not be my
We
politics.
can all get together and do the $3 million studies.
Well,
No, better yet, the study's been done.
I got
This
20
is
bucks.
what happened. Basically, the EPA took a shortcut with biodiesel. It's interesting, it's lumped under the Toxic Substances Control Act, it's all TSCA. Even though the health effects data seems to indicate that biodiesel in itself is non-toxic, right? We all talk about that. And so there's this whole arbitration process that they've developed to test for manufacturers. I mean, obviously a lot of manufacturers were making some pretty heinous stuff. And so they wanted to be sure that manufacturers would submit health effects data, but also that those manufacturers we can encourage to do so by being able to reap the benefits of doing that. The issue is that there's a clause in there that says that the manufacturer who submits the data is expected to recoup a reasonable profit. But what's a reasonable profit?
Well, yeah, and they've got millions right off the bat.
That's
The
a good
soybean
question,
boards.
right?
So that's what the issue is. Long term, it's sort of like you want to cross the bridge and there's someone there telling you need a badge.
But
And,
they're supporting that group.
Not necessarily my interest. I know they're
Right.
supporting interests,
But you,
but the small producer and their agenda is
It's not.
Maybe very different from Big Soy. Big
Absolutely.
Soy is most of the board. Yes, Steve?
I just heard from an MPD board member that they're going to make small producers go away last week. Well,
I did also read that the NDB has just in the past couple of weeks, and me and Todd were talking, it's kind of coincidental with the timing of both of us sending letters to them. They've announced that they're offering a one-time buyout of $25,000 where you can get access to their data and not have to join. So if you're a small producer with 10 years of membership, pay it all at once, and then you don't have to pay them a fee over time. I don't know if they've approved that yet, but anyway, so last couple bullet points about our business. We're two partners. My partner Michael came on full-time with us last year. He makes a very, very measly income, which is a partner draw against his portion of the business income. We hired our first full-time employee about a month ago, a mechanic with 8 years of diesel experience that does our oil collections and pickups. We work him to death already. One night a week we're open to the public. And some of the stuff's fluff, but we average about 40 to 60 hours per week each. And my wife can attest to the fact that I work my ass off all day, every day. I get up at 8 in the morning, I go to bed at 3 in the morning, 5, 6, or 7 days a week. It is a lot of time. I've never taken a salary. I've never taken a dime from the business. It's a lot of work, a lot of work. Real quick, current projects, we collect 3,000 gallons a month from 100 restaurants. We started out with 55-gallon drums, then with a sucker tank, and now we're doing a trailer system with a trash pump. So we sell about 2,500 gallons of WVO per month. Profit margin is about $3 a gallon. It's good money. Much better than biodiesel sales on a per gallon basis. If we didn't have this WVO, we would have been out of business a year ago, and we would have been in debt to about $50,000. So I tell everybody, whoever owns the feedstock owns the market. If you're considering getting into biodiesel, become a grease hauler first. Establish a few customers and get some experience working with grease. Unless you have a real interest or a real connection into virgin oils from some farmer or something, small-scale people need WVO. It is the lifeblood of what we do. Let's see. Demand far exceeds our current supply. I get calls every day from people saying, I've got 10, 18 wheelers, and I want to use biodiesel in it, and we want to make our own, or we want to use waste vegetable oil. Biodiesel suppliers are lining up for our product. Today we sell about 8,500 gallons of B99 per month. We've got 5 retail locations. We do home delivery. We deliver to Willie Nelson. Occasionally we do some large deals. We also convert vehicles to our WVO. We do about a conversion a month. It's just a nice little bit of extra income. A couple things not to do. Frankie knows about this one.
Who's in biodiesel smarter?
Yeah, I wrote a letter to him about this one. We had some interns helping us out. And one night I was there for a delivery. One day I was there for a delivery, and my other partner didn't show up. So it was just me and this truck driver with a 4-inch hose wanting to pump out 7,000 gallons of fuel into a bunch of totes. So it's me and a 4-inch output going into this tote, and it blasted out and just sprayed everything. So there I am wiping up with all these rags, cursing my partner. And later that day, one of our interns comes around and plucks up all the rags, puts them in a nice big pile right on top of a bucket. This barrel is actually full of biodiesel, and this is obviously some pretty flammable installation and a bunch of burned rags. So we got kicked out of our place because of that. She said, "You're out. We don't have fire insurance." She didn't have fire insurance for her property. So we had 30 days to get out, and really she tried to squeeze us into about 2 weeks. That's how we found this really cool place that we're in right now, but it's also how we lost our rendering license. So I always advise people, make sure that anybody who works with you, even on a volunteer basis, is only touching things that you know that they're comfortable with.
Yeah, we had an instance where we cleared up a biodiesel spill with all pickup, took that and put it in the dumpster, and the next morning the lid was deformed where that dumpster.
That's a good point. One of our customers knocked open a ball valve and spilled 200 gallons of biodiesel, filled it with rags and oil dry, put it in their dumpster, and had a major fire at their facility.
Absolutely.
Yeah. They didn't even tell us about it. A month later we were out there and saw the scorched dumpster. I said, yeah, we had a fire. So another thing not to do, we bought this tank on Craigslist and immediately filled it up with 10,000 gallons of fuel. Right as it gets to about the halfway point, the sides start buckling out. So this was a really nice weekend project. We took this really thick rebar that was about 1 inch in diameter, and we ran it across the whole thing, drilled holes in here, and then used some torque wrenches, evacuated the oil out, or the biodiesel out, and then repaired it. So Craigslist can be your friend, but you got to be kind of careful with it. Buy the right equipment to do the job. Everything costs twice as much and takes twice as long as you budget for. Always do dangerous tasks with two people. Plan your work your plan. A lot of people start out with no plan whatsoever. We did too, same thing. And the biggest lesson we've learned is that waste oil collection is a dirty, smelly job.
Oh, well.
Never underestimate it. Future prospects, we want to hire an office manager, full-time salesperson, and start paying me. This company that's doing our rendering actually wants to merge with us, so we might actually wind up taking over that, and I might get into the biodiesel production side, which I would love to do. And we'd like to come into compliance with codes and safety. An interesting footnote to this is I got a text message at lunch today from my business partner saying that our city code violations person stopped by today, and he said we have to shut down our business immediately until we come into compliance with the zoning and the requirements. So as of today, we're out of business until we get this resolved.
Denver's telling Denver Biodiesel
Yeah, it's time for you to
they're
move.
looking at a high floor. So,
We haven't even looked at zoning. So that Monday, that'll be my day on Monday. Anyway, that's a long presentation. I know we're probably over time. Anybody have questions that can't wait till the other presentations tomorrow? Yes.
Does Texas require containment under your tanks?
Well, the EPA does. That's a good point. One of the regulatory issues is an SPCC, spill prevention countermeasure control. Anyone here that's going to be doing biodiesel is almost certainly going to get above the threshold of the 1,300 gallons. Most people, I mean, I think Steve mentioned this, even if you have empty barrels, they can say, if you decided to put whatever in all that stuff, you now have this much liquid that could spill. So what we're going to wind up doing is building an earth berm around all of our tanks and paying us several $1,000s for an engineer to write an SPCC. And then we're also going to have to get the zoning taken care of. We have to get a certificate of occupancy permit. But yeah, definitely. And in fact, Texas is a little stricter, maybe just because there's so much oil. In Austin, you can't put a fuel tank within a city. You can't even have it in the city limits if there's more than 5,000 people in that city. An above-ground storage tank is not allowed. So the only way we were able to work around that is because our flash point is greater than 270 degrees. So if we blend down to about B70, I think, the flash point gets too low, and we can't do that. Now, they've already outlawed blending biodiesel in Texas anyway, so we don't have to worry about that. They're protecting us from ourselves.
No.
Anything else?